In the ancient world, nestled just north of the brilliant city-states of Greece, lay a kingdom often dismissed as little more than a rustic backwater. This was Macedon, a land of rugged mountains and fiercely independent tribes. A place looked down upon by the cultured citizens of Athens and the hardened warriors of Sparta. For centuries, Macedon was a fractured and volatile region, caught between the sophisticated world of the Greeks to the south and the so-called barbarian tribes to the north. Its kings struggled to unify their own people, let alone project power beyond their borders. While the great dramas of the Greco-Persian Wars and the Peloponnesian War unfolded, Macedon remained a peripheral player, a footnote in the grand story of ancient Greece. But from this unlikely corner of the world, a dynasty would emerge that would not only conquer Greece but forge one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. The story of Macedon is a testament to how visionary leadership and military innovation can change the course of history forever. This dramatic transformation began with the ascension of one of history's most brilliant and often overlooked statesmen, Philip II. Taking the throne in 359 BC, Philip inherited a kingdom in chaos, facing threats from all sides. But where others saw disaster, Philip saw opportunity. He was a master strategist, both on the battlefield and in the political arena. His first order of business was to revolutionize the Macedonian army. He took the traditional Greek phalanx, a dense formation of spearmen, and perfected it. He armed his soldiers, the pezzeteroi or foot companions, with the sarissa, a formidable pike nearly 18 feet long. This created an almost impenetrable wall of spear points that could steamroll enemy formations. But Philip knew infantry alone wasn't enough. He cultivated the legendary companion cavalry, an elite force of nobles on horseback that served as his hammer, crashing into the enemy's flank while the phalanx held them in place. This combined arms approach was revolutionary. With his new and improved military machine, Philip began to systematically expand his influence. He was a shrewd diplomat, using treaties, strategic marriages, and good old-fashioned bribery to bring neighboring tribes and Greek cities into his orbit. He secured the rich gold and silver mines of the region, filling his treasury and funding his ambitions. The Greek city-states, weakened by decades of infighting, were slow to recognize the threat growing in the north. The Athenian orator Demosthenes passionately warned his fellow citizens about Philip's ambitions, but his pleas largely fell on deaf ears until it was too late. The decisive moment came at the Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BC. Here, Philip's army, with his teenage son Alexander commanding the cavalry on the left flank, crushed the combined forces of Athens and Thebes. With this single victory, Philip established Macedonian hegemony over all of Greece, unifying the Hellenic world under his command for the first time. His next goal was even grander, to lead a pan-Hellenic invasion of the mighty Persian Empire. But fate had other plans. In 336 BC, at his daughter's wedding, Philip II was assassinated, leaving his vast ambitions and his powerful kingdom in the hands of his 20-year-old son. That son was Alexander, a young man who had been preparing for this moment his entire life. Philip had spared no expense on his son's education, famously hiring the greatest mind of the age, the philosopher Aristotle, to be his tutor. Aristotle instilled in Alexander a love for literature, science, and philosophy, but also a deep curiosity about the world. This intellectual training, combined with his father's military and political tutelage, created a leader of unparalleled genius. But upon his father's death, Alexander's throne was anything but secure. Rivals at home and rebellious city-states in Greece saw an opportunity to break free from Macedonian control. Alexander responded with lightning speed and terrifying brutality. When the city of Thebes revolted, he marched his army south and utterly destroyed it, selling its population into slavery as a grim warning to the rest of Greece. The message was clear. The young king was not to be trifled with. With his Greek flank secured, Alexander turned his attention to his father's ultimate dream, the conquest of Persia. In 334 BC, Alexander crossed the Hellespont into Asia with an army of around 40,000 Macedonians and Greeks. It was an audacious gamble, pitting his small but professional force against the limitless resources of the Persian Empire, the largest and wealthiest state on earth, ruled by King Darius III. The first major test came at the Granicus River. Outnumbered, Alexander personally led his companion cavalry in a daring charge across the river and shattered the Persian lines. It was a stunning victory that opened up the coast of Asia Minor. A year later, at the Battle of Issus, Alexander faced Darius himself. In a brilliant tactical maneuver, he identified a gap in the Persian line and charged directly at the Persian king. Darius, fearing for his life, fled the battlefield, causing his massive army to collapse in panic. The victory was total, and Alexander even captured the Persian king's family, whom he treated with honor and respect. From there, he marched south, securing the Mediterranean coast and famously laying siege to the island fortress of Tyre. He then entered Egypt, where he was welcomed as a liberator from Persian rule and proclaimed a pharaoh. It was here, at the mouth of the Nile, that he founded the first and most famous of his many cities, Alexandria. The final confrontation with Darius came in 331 BC on the plains of Gaugamela, in modern-day Iraq. Darius had gathered an immense army from across his empire, reportedly numbering in the hundreds of thousands, including scythed chariots and war elephants. Facing these overwhelming odds, Alexander executed his greatest tactical masterpiece. He advanced with his line at an angle, drawing the Persian cavalry out to the flanks. Then, just as at Issus, he spotted an opening near the center created by Darius' movements and led his elite cavalry in a decisive charge straight at the king. Once again, Darius fled, and once again, the Persian army disintegrated. The Battle of Gaugamela marked the end of the Persian Empire. Alexander marched in triumph into Babylon and Persepolis, the ceremonial capital, which was later burned to the ground. But Alexander was not content. Driven by an insatiable desire, or pothos, he pushed his army ever eastward, through the deserts and mountains of modern-day Iran and Afghanistan, and all the way to the edge of the known world, India. At the Battle of the Hydaspes River, he defeated the Indian king Paras and his formidable war elephants. It was only when his exhausted troops, thousands of miles from home, finally mutinied that he reluctantly agreed to turn back. His long march home was a brutal ordeal, particularly the crossing of the Jedrosian Desert, which cost the lives of thousands. He eventually returned to Babylon, the new capital of his vast multicultural empire. Alexander's conquests were about more than just military glory. He was a visionary who sought to fuse the cultures of Greece and the East. He encouraged his soldiers to marry local women, and he himself took Persian wives. He adopted elements of Persian court ceremony and dress, and he incorporated Persian nobles into his administration and army. This blending of cultures initiated a new historical era known as the Hellenistic Age. Greek language, art, architecture, and philosophy spread across the Middle East and Central Asia, while Eastern ideas, religions, and sciences flowed back to the West. This cultural synthesis would shape the development of the region for centuries to come, profoundly influencing the later Roman and Byzantine empires. But Alexander would not live to see his vision fully realized. In 323 BC, in Babylon, after a prolonged bout of fever, Alexander the Great died at the age of just 32. He left behind a colossal empire with no designated heir. When asked on his deathbed to whom he left his kingdom, he supposedly whispered, "To the strongest." His words proved prophetic. Immediately following his death, his most powerful generals, known as the Diadochi, or successors, began a brutal, decades-long power struggle for control of his empire. The vast territory Alexander had conquered was torn apart in a series of civil wars. Eventually, the empire fractured into several large Hellenistic kingdoms. Ptolemy took Egypt, founding the Ptolemaic dynasty that would include the famous Cleopatra. Seleucus seized the vast eastern territories, creating the Seleucid Empire. And Antigonus established a dynasty back in Macedon and Greece. These kingdoms continued the legacy of Hellenistic culture, building magnificent cities, libraries, and centers of learning like Alexandria and Pergamon. Though Alexander's unified empire was short-lived, his legacy was immense. He had shattered the old world order and created a new interconnected world that stretched from Greece to India. He redrew the map of the ancient world and, in just 13 short years, irrevocably changed the course of history. From the forgotten hills of Macedon to the banks of the Indus, the story of Alexander and his empire remains one of the most astonishing chapters in the human story. Before Alexander the Great conquered the known world, there was another man, a king, a visionary who laid the entire groundwork. This is the story of his father, Philip II of Macedon, the man who forged an army that would change history forever. How did a small, backwater kingdom in northern Greece become the most dominant military power of its time? Stick around, because the answer is a masterclass in strategy, innovation, and sheer ruthless ambition. Picture this: mid-4th century BC, Macedonia is a mess. It's a fractured kingdom, surrounded by hostile neighbors like the Thracians and Illyrians, and looked down upon by the powerful Greek city-states to the south, like Athens and Thebes. They saw Macedonians as little more than barbarians. For decades, Macedonian kings had struggled just to keep their kingdom from collapsing. Then, in 359 BC, Philip takes the throne. He wasn't even supposed to be king. He was a regent for his infant nephew. But with the kingdom on the brink of disaster, he seized the opportunity. Philip knew that to survive, let alone thrive, he needed one thing above all else: a completely new kind of army. The old Macedonian military was a part-time militia of nobles on horseback, and peasant farmers with whatever weapons they could afford. It was unreliable and no match for the professional armies of the day. Philip's first move was to professionalize his military. He turned soldiering into a full-time, paid career. This was revolutionary. For the first time, Macedonian men from all walks of life could earn a steady living, food, and land by serving in the army. This created a loyal, disciplined force that was always ready for battle, training year-round, not just when their farms didn't need them. With a professional army in place, Philip then turned his genius to tactics and equipment. He took the dominant formation of the era, the Greek phalanx, and supercharged it. The traditional Greek phalanx used spears about 8 to 10 feet long. Philip's innovation? The sarissa. This was a massive two-handed pike, stretching an incredible 18 feet, sometimes even longer. Imagine facing a wall of these things. The front 5 ranks of his phalanx could all point their sarissas forward at the same time, creating an impenetrable hedgehog of death that no enemy could get close to. But holding a giant 18-foot pike with 2 hands means you can't hold a large shield. So Philip equipped his men with smaller shields, slung over their necks, protecting their left side. This made his phalanx lighter and more mobile than its Greek counterparts. The soldiers in this new Macedonian phalanx were called peziteroi, or foot companions. This name itself was a stroke of genius. It gave these common soldiers a sense of honor and belonging, making them feel like they were the king's personal comrades. Philip knew a phalanx alone wasn't enough. It was powerful head-on, but vulnerable on the flanks. This is where he implemented his famous hammer and anvil tactic. The phalanx was the anvil, a solid, unmovable block that would pin the enemy in place. The hammer was his cavalry. Philip inherited a decent noble cavalry, but he reformed and expanded it into the elite companion cavalry. These were the best horsemen in the world, heavily armed and armored, and led by Philip himself. Here's how it worked. The Macedonian phalanx would advance and engage the enemy's main line, holding them fast. While the enemy was completely focused on the wall of sarissas in front of them, the companion cavalry would thunder around the side or the back, crashing into the enemy's flank or rear. Trapped between the anvil of the phalanx and the hammer of the cavalry, the enemy formation would shatter. It was a devastatingly effective combination of infantry and cavalry working in perfect sync. But Philip didn't stop there. He was a master of combined arms warfare. He created specialized units for every possible situation. He had light cavalry for scouting and skirmishing. He had elite infantry units like the hypaspists, or shield bearers. These were versatile soldiers armed with shorter spears and larger shields who could fight alongside the phalanx, protect its vulnerable flanks, or undertake special missions. Think of them as the special forces of the ancient world. And then there was his siege warfare. Before Philip, taking a well-fortified city was a long, drawn-out, and often unsuccessful process. Philip turned it into a science. He hired the best engineers and created a dedicated siege train, a mobile unit of powerful new siege engines. He developed massive catapults, like the torsion-powered oxybelos and lithobolos, which could hurl bolts and huge stones with terrifying force and accuracy. He built massive siege towers, sometimes over 100 feet tall, that could be rolled up to a city's walls, allowing his troops to storm the ramparts directly. For the first time, no city wall was truly safe. Philip's genius wasn't just in creating these units, but in drilling them to work together as a single, cohesive machine. He conducted relentless training and harsh discipline. His soldiers marched for miles in full armor, built fortified camps every single night, and practiced complex maneuvers until they were second nature. He fostered a deep sense of camaraderie and loyalty. He knew his men by name, fought alongside them in the front lines, and shared their hardships. He was wounded multiple times, an arrow to the eye, a lance through the leg, a broken collarbone. His soldiers saw his scars and they loved him for it. They would follow him anywhere, and they did. With this incredible military machine, Philip II systematically expanded his kingdom. He subdued the Illyrians and Thracians, securing his borders. He took control of the gold and silver mines of northern Greece, giving him a massive treasury to fund his army and his ambitions. Then he turned his sights south, towards the divided Greek city-states. He used a mix of diplomacy, bribery, and when necessary, overwhelming force. The decisive moment came in 338 BC at the Battle of Chaeronea. Here, Philip's new army faced the combined might of Athens and Thebes, including the legendary Theban sacred band. It was the ultimate test. The battle was fierce, but Philip's tactics were superior. He famously feigned a retreat with his right wing, drawing the Athenian soldiers forward and creating a gap in their line. At the perfect moment, his son, a young prince named Alexander, led the companion cavalry crashing through that gap, shattering the Greek formation. The Macedonian phalanx then advanced and completed the victory. It was a total triumph. The age of the independent Greek city-state was over. Philip had become the undisputed master of Greece. With Greece united under his command, Philip announced his grandest plan yet, to lead a pan-Hellenic army to invade the mighty Persian Empire, to avenge the Persian invasions of Greece from a century earlier. It was an ambition of breathtaking scale, but he would never see it through. In 336 BC, at the height of his power, Philip II was assassinated. The world was shocked. But the army he built, the machine he forged through 2 decades of tireless innovation, did not die with him. It was inherited by his 20-year-old son Alexander. And with that army, Alexander the Great would not just invade Persia, he would conquer it, and march all the way to India, creating one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. So next time you hear the name Alexander the Great, remember the man who made it all possible. Philip II of Macedon, the king who took a broken kingdom and forged an army of professionals, armed them with revolutionary weapons, trained them to perfection, and led them with unmatched personal courage. He was the true architect of conquest, the man who set the stage for one of history's greatest epics. In the annals of history, few names resonate with the same power and ambition as Alexander the Great, a man whose vision knew no bounds, whose ambition was to conquer the known world and unite it under one rule. From the small kingdom of Macedon, he forged an empire that stretched from Greece to the northwestern frontiers of India, leaving an indelible mark on the course of civilization. This is the story of a military genius, a visionary leader, and a legend who, in just over a decade, redrew the map of the ancient world. Born in 356 BC in Pella, the capital of Macedon, Alexander was no ordinary prince. He was the son of King Philip II, a brilliant military strategist who had transformed Macedon into a formidable power. From a young age, Alexander displayed a restless spirit and a keen intellect. His father, recognizing his potential, enlisted one of the greatest minds of the era to be his tutor, the philosopher Aristotle. For 3 years, Aristotle schooled the young prince in everything from rhetoric and literature to politics and the natural sciences, instilling in him a deep love for knowledge and a curiosity about the world that would fuel his future conquests. He was also a prodigious horseman, famously taming the wild stallion Bucephalus, a horse that would carry him through countless battles. This combination of martial training and philosophical education created a leader unlike any other. But his youth was cut short. In 336 BC, King Philip II was assassinated, thrusting the 20-year-old Alexander onto the throne. He acted swiftly and decisively, eliminating his rivals and crushing rebellions in the Greek city-states to solidify his rule. With Macedon and Greece firmly under his control, he turned his eyes to his father's ultimate unfulfilled dream, the conquest of the mighty Persian Empire. In the spring of 334 BC, Alexander led his army of Macedonians and Greek allies across the Hellespont into Asia Minor. This was more than an invasion. It was a crusade, framed as revenge for the Persian invasions of Greece a century and a half earlier. The first major test came at the Granicus River, where Alexander, leading a daring cavalry charge himself, shattered the Persian defenses. This victory opened the gates of Asia Minor. For the next few years, he marched down the coast, liberating Greek cities and methodically dismantling Persian control. He famously solved the puzzle of the Gordian knot, an intricate knot that legend said could only be untied by the future king of Asia. Alexander, in a characteristic display of directness, simply drew his sword and sliced it in half. The ultimate confrontation with the Persian king, Darius III, came in 331 BC at the Battle of Gaugamela. Despite being heavily outnumbered, Alexander's tactical brilliance was on full display. He created a gap in the Persian lines, charged directly at Darius, and forced the Persian king to flee the battlefield, causing his vast army to collapse. The victory was absolute. Alexander marched unopposed into Babylon and then to the ceremonial capital of Persepolis, the heart of the Persian Empire. In a controversial act, he ordered the grand palace of Persepolis to be burned, a symbolic gesture marking the end of Persian dominance and the dawn of a new era. With Persia conquered, Alexander continued his march. In 332 BC, he turned south towards Egypt. The Egyptians, who had long resented Persian rule, welcomed him not as a conqueror, but as a liberator. He was crowned pharaoh and, in a pivotal moment, he made a pilgrimage to the oracle of Siwa oasis in the Libyan desert. There, the priests proclaimed him the son of the Egyptian god Amun-Ra, which the Greeks equated with Zeus. This declaration of divinity elevated his status from a mere king to a living god in the eyes of many of his subjects, a powerful tool for ruling such a vast and diverse empire. It was in Egypt that he also founded the first and most famous of the many cities that would bear his name, Alexandria. Strategically located on the Mediterranean coast, Alexandria was destined to become a cosmopolitan hub of trade, culture, and learning. Home to the Great Lighthouse and the legendary library, a beacon of knowledge for centuries to come. But for Alexander, the world was still not enough. His ambition drove him further east, beyond the boundaries of the former Persian Empire, into lands the Greeks knew only through myth and legend. In 327 BC, he crossed the Hindu Kush Mountains and entered the Punjab region. Here, he encountered a new kind of warfare, facing fierce Indian kingdoms with armored war elephants, a terrifying sight for his soldiers and horses. The most formidable of these encounters was the Battle of the Hydaspes River in 326 BC against King Porus. It was one of Alexander's costliest and most difficult battles. Though he was ultimately victorious, his respect for Porus's bravery was so great that he allowed him to continue ruling his kingdom as a satrap. Alexander wished to press on, to reach the ends of the world, at the Ganges River, but his army, exhausted after 8 years of relentless campaigning and thousands of miles from home, had reached its limit. At the Hyphasis River, his weary and homesick troops refused to go any further. For the first time, Alexander was forced to yield to the will of his men. Reluctantly, he agreed to turn back. The journey home was as perilous as any battle. Alexander split his forces, leading one contingent on a grueling march through the treacherous Gedrosian desert, while his fleet, under the command of Nearchus, sailed along the coast. The desert crossing was a disaster, with thousands of his soldiers perishing from heat and thirst. When he finally returned to Babylon in 324 BC, he began the monumental task of organizing his colossal empire. He encouraged mass marriages between his soldiers and Persian women to foster a fusion of cultures and planned new expeditions, including the circumnavigation of Arabia. But these plans would never be realized. In June of 323 BC, after a prolonged bout of fever following a banquet, Alexander the Great died. He was just 32 years old. On his deathbed, when asked to whom he left his empire, he is said to have whispered, "To the strongest." Alexander's death without a clear heir plunged his empire into chaos. His leading generals, known as the Diadochi or successors, immediately began fighting amongst themselves for control. For decades, the wars of the Diadochi raged, ultimately fracturing the empire into several Hellenistic kingdoms, most notably the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt, the Seleucid Empire in Asia, and the Antigonid dynasty in Macedon. While his political empire did not survive him, his cultural legacy was immense and enduring. His conquests initiated the Hellenistic period, a 300-year era characterized by the spread of Greek language, art, philosophy, and political ideas across the Near East and Central Asia. This fusion of Greek and Eastern cultures created a vibrant new civilization that profoundly influenced the development of the Roman Empire and, by extension, Western civilization itself. From a boy king of a small northern kingdom to the ruler of the largest empire the world had yet seen, Alexander's life was a whirlwind of conquest and ambition. He was a military genius who never lost a battle, a visionary who sought to unite East and West, and a figure whose legend continues to inspire and captivate us more than 2 millennia after his death. Imagine a world of sprawling empires, of bronze-clad soldiers and philosophies that would shape humanity. In a corner of this world, a small kingdom called Macedon is about to change everything. From this rugged land in northern Greece, a young prince with a fire in his eyes would rise, a student of the great Aristotle, destined not just to conquer, but to reshape civilization itself. His name was Alexander. When his father, Philip II, was assassinated, Alexander, at just 20 years old, inherited a powerful army and an audacious dream: to unite the Greek world and challenge the colossal Persian Empire, the superpower of its day. This wasn't just a mission of revenge or conquest. It was a crusade, a clash of civilizations that would echo through the ages. The stage was set for one of the most incredible military campaigns in history. In 334 BC, Alexander crossed the Hellespont into Asia. What followed was a whirlwind of conquest that seems almost mythical. At the Battle of the Granicus, he shattered the first Persian defenses. At Issus, he faced the mighty King Darius III himself and sent him fleeing, capturing the Persian royal family. But Alexander wasn't just a brute conqueror. He was a master strategist, a leader who fought alongside his men, inspiring unwavering loyalty. He marched south, and Egypt, weary of Persian rule, welcomed him as a liberator. They crowned him pharaoh, a living god. It was here, at the mouth of the Nile, that he founded the first and most famous of his many cities, Alexandria. This wasn't just a military outpost. It was envisioned as a beacon of knowledge, culture, and commerce, a jewel of his New World Order. The great library of Alexandria would one day become the intellectual heart of the ancient world. But the heart of the Persian Empire still beat. Alexander turned east again, deep into Mesopotamia. At Gaugamela, he faced Darius for the final time. Outnumbered, but not outmaneuvered, Alexander's tactical genius delivered a decisive, crushing victory. The Persian Empire, which had dominated the known world for 2 centuries, was his. He marched into the legendary cities of Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis, the spectacular ceremonial capital. The wealth he captured was beyond imagination, but Alexander's vision extended far beyond gold and glory. His empire was now the largest the world had ever seen, stretching from Greece all the way to the dusty plains of Central Asia. But with his army, he carried more than just swords and spears. He carried an idea. This idea is what we now call Hellenization. It was the intentional spread of Greek culture, its language, its philosophy, its art, its political ideas, and its way of life. Koine Greek, a common dialect, became the lingua franca across this vast new territory. It was the language of administration, trade, and intellectual discourse, allowing people from vastly different backgrounds to communicate and share ideas like never before. Think of it as the English of the ancient world. Gymnasiums, theaters, and Greek-style public buildings began to appear in cities from the Nile to the Indus. The philosophies of Plato and Aristotle were debated in new centers of learning. This wasn't a one-way street, though. Alexander didn't seek to erase the cultures he conquered. Instead, he encouraged a fusion. He himself adopted Persian customs, wore Persian-style clothing, and even arranged a mass marriage between his Macedonian officers and Persian noblemen to symbolically unite the two peoples. He saw himself not just as a Greek king, but as a ruler of a new, blended world. This cultural fusion created something entirely new and dynamic. Look at the art of the period. The famous Gandhara art from modern-day Pakistan and Afghanistan shows Buddha statues sculpted in a distinctly Greek realistic style, complete with flowing robes reminiscent of a Greek god. It's a perfect visual metaphor for Hellenization, Eastern subject matter rendered with Western technique. In architecture, Greek columns were added to Eastern temples. In religion, Greek and local gods were often syncretized, with deities like Zeus being identified with the Egyptian Ammon to become Zeus Ammon. This blend was happening in every facet of life, from governance, where Greek administrative models were adapted to local traditions, to science, where Greek astronomy and mathematics were enriched by Babylonian and Egyptian knowledge. Alexander's relentless drive pushed him even further east, across the Hindu Kush and into the Indian subcontinent. He fought his final major battle at the Hydaspes River against King Porus and his war elephants. Though victorious, Alexander's weary troops, thousands of miles from home, finally refused to go further. He had reached the edge of his known world. Reluctantly, he turned back. But Alexander would never see his homeland again. In 323 BC, in the city of Babylon, he He fell ill and died at the age of just 32. His vast empire, held together by the sheer force of his personality, immediately began to fracture. His leading generals, the Diadochi, carved it up into successor kingdoms: the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt, the Seleucid Empire in Asia, and the Antigonid dynasty in Macedon and Greece. So was it all for nothing? Absolutely not. While the political unity of Alexander's empire was short-lived, its cultural legacy was profound and permanent. The Hellenistic world he created persisted for centuries. This network of Greek-speaking kingdoms fostered trade, innovation, and an unprecedented exchange of ideas across 3 continents. It was in Ptolemaic Alexandria that the Earth's circumference was first accurately calculated, that the foundations of geometry were laid down by Euclid, and that the Hebrew Bible was first translated into Greek. This Hellenistic world became the bridge between classical Greece and the rising power of Rome. When the Romans eventually conquered these lands, they were themselves deeply influenced by the Greco-Macedonian culture they encountered. They absorbed its art, its literature, its philosophy, and its science, preserving it and transmitting it throughout their own vast empire. Ultimately, the Macedonian Empire, forged in a breathtaking decade of conquest, did more than just redraw the map. It erased cultural boundaries, creating a new, cosmopolitan civilization. Alexander the Great's dream of a unified world may have died with him, but the cultural world he birthed, the Hellenistic world, laid the very foundations for the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, and shaped the intellectual and cultural trajectory of both Western and Eastern civilizations for millennia to come. The echo of that young king from Macedon can still be heard today. In 323 BC, in the opulent city of Babylon, the world held its breath. Alexander the Great, the conqueror who had carved an empire stretching from Greece to India, lay on his deathbed at the young age of 32. His final words, when asked who should inherit his vast domain, were cryptic and fateful to the strongest. This single phrase, or perhaps the silence that followed, ignited a firestorm that would consume his legacy and tear his empire apart. Alexander's empire was a marvel, a melting pot of cultures held together by the sheer force of his personality and military genius. But it was an empire built on conquest, not consolidation. He left behind no clear heir, only a pregnant wife, Roxana, and a mentally disabled half-brother, Philip Aridaeus. The stage was set for a power vacuum of epic proportions, and his ambitious generals, the Diadochi or successors, were more than ready to fill it. Initially, a fragile peace was brokered. The empire was to be held in trust for Alexander's unborn son, with his top generals acting as regents and governors. Perdiccas was named regent of the empire, while others like Ptolemy, Antigonus, and Seleucus were appointed as satraps or governors of key territories. Ptolemy took Egypt, a land of ancient wealth and strategic importance. Antigonus the One-Eyed, a formidable and ruthless commander, controlled much of Anatolia. This arrangement, however, was merely a ceasefire, a brief calm before a 4-decade-long storm known as the Wars of the Diadochi. The first cracks appeared almost immediately. The generals, these brothers in arms, were driven by insatiable ambition. They had marched to the ends of the known world with Alexander. They saw themselves not as caretakers, but as his rightful heirs. Perdiccas, as regent, tried to maintain central authority, but his power was constantly challenged. His decision to march against Ptolemy in Egypt proved to be his undoing. The campaign was a disaster, culminating in his assassination by his own mutinous officers in 321 BC. The dream of a united empire died with him. What followed was a brutal, chaotic free-for-all. Alliances were forged and broken with dizzying speed. Yesterday's ally was tomorrow's mortal enemy. The vast territories of Alexander's conquest became a chessboard for these warlords, and the pawns were the countless soldiers and civilians caught in the crossfire. Let's look at the key players in this deadly game. In the west, Cassander, son of the regent Antipater, seized control of Macedonia, Alexander's homeland. In a move of shocking cruelty, he executed Alexander's mother, Olympias, his wife, Roxana, and his young son, Alexander IV. With their deaths, the Argead dynasty, the royal line of Philip II and Alexander the Great, was extinguished forever. The last living links to the conqueror were gone. In the east, the formidable Antigonus Monophthalmus, or Antigonus the One-Eyed, came closest to reuniting the empire. He was an old-school Macedonian general, brilliant and utterly relentless. By 315 BC, he controlled a massive territory from the Aegean Sea to the borders of Babylonia. He declared himself king, a bold move that forced the other generals to do the same. The pretense of a unified empire was officially over. Now they were all kings, each carving out their own Hellenistic kingdom. But Antigonus's ambition was his undoing. His vast power united his rivals against him. A grand coalition formed, featuring Ptolemy in Egypt, Seleucus in Babylon, Cassander in Macedonia, and Lysimachus in Thrace. The decisive showdown came in 301 BC at the Battle of Ipsus in Phrygia. It was one of the largest battles of the ancient world, a clash of titans involving tens of thousands of soldiers and hundreds of war elephants. In the end, the 81-year-old Antigonus was defeated and killed, his body pierced by multiple javelins. His dream of a new Alexandrian empire died with him on that dusty plain. The aftermath of Ipsus solidified the division of the empire into several major Hellenistic kingdoms. The three most significant and long-lasting were the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt, the Seleucid Empire in the Near East, and the Antigonid kingdom in Macedonia. Let's start with Ptolemy's Egypt. Of all the successor kingdoms, this was perhaps the most stable and prosperous. Ptolemy, a shrewd and cautious leader, focused on consolidating his rule over the wealthy lands of the Nile. He established a new dynasty that blended Greek and Egyptian traditions. The Ptolemies ruled as pharaohs, embracing local customs while establishing a Greek-speaking administration. Their capital, Alexandria, which Alexander himself had founded, became the jewel of the Mediterranean, a dazzling center of commerce, science, and culture. Home to the legendary Great Library and the Lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. The Ptolemaic dynasty would last for nearly 300 years, ending only with the death of its final, iconic ruler, Cleopatra VII. Next, we have the Seleucid Empire, founded by Seleucus Nicator, or the Victor. At its height, this was the largest of the successor states, stretching from modern-day Turkey to the borders of India. It was a vast, multicultural, and incredibly challenging territory to govern. Seleucus and his successors founded numerous cities, spreading Greek language and culture far into the east. However, the empire's sheer size was also its greatest weakness. It was constantly plagued by internal revolts and external threats. Over time, eastern provinces like Parthia and Bactria broke away, forming their own powerful kingdoms. The Seleucid Empire slowly shrank, chipped away piece by piece until its remnants were finally absorbed by the rising power of Rome. Finally, back in the homeland, the Antigonid dynasty, established by the grandson of Antigonus the One-Eyed, eventually secured control of Macedonia. They faced the difficult task of governing the fiercely independent Greek city-states to their south, who often chafed under Macedonian rule and formed leagues to resist it. The Antigonids were constantly embroiled in the complex politics of mainland Greece. Their ultimate downfall, like that of the other Hellenistic kingdoms, came at the hands of a new, disciplined power from the west. That power was Rome. As the Hellenistic kingdoms warred amongst themselves, they failed to notice the rise of the Roman Republic. Rome was organized, relentless, and possessed a military machine unlike any the world had seen. Starting in the 2nd century BC, Rome began to intervene in the affairs of the East. One by one, the successor kingdoms fell. Macedonia was defeated and turned into a Roman province in 168 BC. The Seleucid Empire was dismantled. And finally, in 30 BC, Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus, defeated Mark Antony and Cleopatra, annexing Egypt and bringing the Hellenistic age to a close. So why did Alexander's empire collapse so spectacularly? The answer is multifaceted. First, there was no clear succession plan. Alexander's genius was personal, not institutional. His empire was held together by his own charisma and the loyalty he inspired. Without him, that glue dissolved. Second, the sheer ambition of his generals, men who saw themselves as equals and successors, made any form of collective rule impossible. They were wolves, and the empire was their prey. Finally, the empire itself was too vast and diverse to be governed as a single entity in the long term without a figure of Alexander's stature. The fall of Alexander's empire was not just an end. It was also a beginning. The wars of the Diadochi, as destructive as they were, shattered Alexander's world and scattered its pieces across 3 continents. From these fragments arose the Hellenistic kingdoms,